I want to start by thanking SF Environment, Department, and Kalaya Cruz for their support and partnership in this series, as well as for Recology for their participation, as well as their resources and technical assistance offered to our hospital partners. Right. Ooh, second. Okay. Um, Everyone can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Great. So the Zero Waste Hospitals workshop series is a ongoing program, again, by SF Environment. And what it provides is a venue and a network for hospitals to support their path to zero waste, supporting compliance with local regulations, best practices, unique challenges, and most importantly, to connect. Both to connect hospitals with SF Environment and the Recology team and their resources, as well as to connect with each other. Zero waste solutions are regional solutions. And so it's really great to have our network really solving unique healthcare challenges and opportunities together. So today's webinar is the second in our 2025 workshop series. And so today's workshop series is uniquely online. Because of that, we have invited partners from our wider network, and we welcome you and thank you for joining us today. To our local San Francisco hospital partners, thank you for joining us online as well. Again, this is workshop number 2. The next upcoming workshop is in person. It's on April 2nd. And so please mark your calendars so that you can join us for education and engagement. So for today's webinar series, we are featuring 2 really great panelists focusing on kind of best practices and exemplary programs in zero waste hospitals. What we will do is feature their presentations and then take 1 to 2 questions for each speaker afterwards, and then we will open up the floor for questions at the end. Now, the way we'll take these channels, or the way that we will take these questions is in the chat. And so please put your questions into the chat. Margie will be monitoring and supporting getting those questions out. So thank you, Margie, for that work. Please also remember to mute your Zoom so that we can keep things rolling without interruptions. So we are going to talk a lot on the how of zero waste, really looking at those success elements, but I thought we would start with the why. Every hospital has a unique reason, but there's some overlap here on why we are supporting zero waste. Your hospital may have a strong culture of sustainability or some public-facing commitments in place on climate action. Every hospital has in common the mission of community health, and we know that we support community health through a healthy environment. One thing that San Francisco and other California hospitals have in common is a regulatory compliance impetus. In the city of San Francisco, their zero waste regulations are really linked as a driver to their climate action plan, a plan, by the way, that is working. And so the zero waste targets within that climate action plan are to reduce total waste generation, so to reduce the total amount of waste that we're generating by 15% by 2030. And they have a diversion goal in there to reduce disposal to landfill and incineration by 50% by 2030. Now, to support achieving those goals, there are 2 main ordinances. The first is the mandatory recycling and composting ordinance, establishing 3 streams instead of 1 garbage can. There's some specific setup and collection standards in there as well. The second ordinance is the refuse separation ordinance, and there is some very specific considerations in there for large refuse generators like hospitals. One of the things that it includes, of course, is regular audits and some very specific contamination levels by collection stream. Now, hospitals or other businesses who fail their regular audits are then subjected to other regulatory requirements, such as the need to hire a zero waste facilitator, excess refuse collection fees, as well as potential fines down the line. Now, San Francisco is committed to helping all of its large refuse generators, including hospitals, on the path to zero waste. And so today we're really looking at the how. One way that San Francisco is supporting is through workshops such as this one today. And we're excited to really look at 2 exemplary zero waste programs. Now, every hospital has a unique path to zero waste as well, but there are some core success elements. To succeed in achieving zero waste, every hospital should have a solid strategy, really thoughtful process design, as well as a commitment to continuous quality improvement. And so we are happy today to feature two programs that really integrate these success elements and are going to go ahead and present our first panelist. So joining us first is Avery Palardy, and she leads sustainability at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center as Climate and Sustainability Director. Now, Avery leads the hospital in its environmental and sustainability goals and strategic commitments through collaboration across multiple departments, including facilities, supply chain, support services, communications, and clinical groups. Her role is focused on minimizing the environmental and public health impacts of all hospital activities while ensuring BIDMC delivers extraordinary and compassionate patient care. Welcome to our workshop series, Avery. I'm going to hand it over to you to lead this off, but I thought you could start kind of with your why. Are there regulatory impetus for your zero waste program? Is it internal? You can just start off by sharing why, and then we'll let you share your wonderful program. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for having me today, Erica. Thank you for that introduction. Really excited to talk to you about our zero waste program at BIDMC. Really, the heart and the creation of this program started back in between 2020 and 2021 when we were on a path to really formalize a lot of historical grassroots sustainability efforts and really work with our senior leadership team and our environmental sustainability committee at the time to identify what our sustainability targets would be that would help allow us to become leaders in healthcare. And so one of the areas when looking towards regulatory requirements and what the city of Boston was requiring, we wanted to kind of take it a step above what was already being asked. And so in Massachusetts, the Department of Environmental Protection does have a series of waste bans on a variety of materials ranging from cardboard to construction demolition to a number of other universal waste streams, etc. And so we were already in compliance with that type of regulation. And then when looking at the city of Boston, they have a zero waste by 2030 target looking at residential communities. And knowing how typically the city and state progress with their targets and their commitments, we recognize that most likely that they would be looking to the commercial industry at some point. And given how complex waste is in healthcare, we wanted to get started early and to start grappling with this challenge of zero waste at the forefront. And so we weren't scrambling in the future, while also then looking towards our peers across the country on what were other healthcare organizations that were leaders in waste setting targets around, and it looked to be zero waste. So our leadership team was very much in support with kind of those reasons, as well as kind of the financial and operational savings opportunities as well when you're thinking about waste and waste reduction opportunities. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about the strategy behind our program and a lot of the education and training resources that we've helped to kind of develop as we move this program forward. So really briefly, for those that aren't familiar with BIDMC, as I am over on the East Coast, we are an academic medical center located in the city of Boston. We have two main campuses, total of 3.7 million square feet, about 12,000 employees. We have all of the complex waste streams happening across our sites, from research to pharmacy operations to obviously clinical operations as well. And so when talking about zero waste, it becomes a unique complex topic that I know all of you are probably struggling with as well. And so kind of building upon what I mentioned before, really zero waste is part of our larger sustainability strategy and our kind of overarching mission and vision to progress and hopefully reduce our environmental impact and be able to hopefully create a healthy future for our patients, their families, and ourselves. A core aspect of our zero waste program is really engagement. As an organization, we recognize that without employees being aware of what we're trying to achieve and what types of programs are available towards them, in addition, given how cross-departmental the topic of zero waste is, we really have had a lot of focus on building local leaders across our hospital to really be advocates for these programs and be those points of context and resources for those around them. And so that's where you'll see that we have this kind of engagement goal about increasing familiarity and leadership across the organization. And I'll talk a little bit more about our governance in a moment. Um, so everyone kind of looks and defines zero waste a little differently. Originally, we had looked towards the true certification definition, which is looking at 90% diversion away from landfill. But ultimately, we ended up aligned with what the city of Boston was defining as zero waste, which is an 80% diversion of non-hazardous solid waste from landfill incineration. And so really focusing on how do we shift our materials and our resources up to the highest and best use and apply the waste hierarchy. Um, and so from a healthcare perspective, even though we're technically the target is around non-hazardous solid waste, we very much are tracking every single waste stream across our facilities because acknowledging that we also don't want to unintentionally overclassify any waste and send any what should be municipal solid waste into one of our regulated waste streams. And so there's definitely a careful balance and very much a holistic approach when we're talking about zero waste in this goal. And I'll be able to highlight that a little bit further in some of our training materials. But really, we train across both the regulated and all of the sustainability programs that have been built around that. Um, I already kind of mentioned the why a little bit, but really to keep momentum moving forward, we do track all of the financial savings and the operational costs associated with our program. And we actually had a $3.7 million positive financial impact last year when you're talking about all of our opportunities around reduction, reuse, recycling, and our other waste diversion programs. And so lots of opportunity to kind of um, uh, build the business case for whoever you're talking to across the organization. So great, we set a target. We had a goal back in 2020, 2021. Our next step was, okay, let's build a strategy around this. We had our inspirational mission. We had now that as an aspirational target, but we didn't really know how we were going to move forward. And so we put together a series of focus groups with the departments that are outlined on the slide to really build out the directional focus and to be able to build out what were the actions we were going to take as we moved forward. Ultimately, our strategic plan has strategies and actions across each of the waste hierarchy, each of the levels of the waste hierarchy. And from here, after a plan was drafted, we actually went through a roadshow to all of our senior leaders and discussed all of the actions that were assigned to their department or their department would be responsible for to help, one, gain their buy-in support, but then also to adjust to be more in alignment with whatever they were focusing on over the next 5 years, as well as actually add actions that we may have not we may have overlooked as we were creating this plan. So after a long process of building kind of leadership buy-in, this plan was officially received the stamp of approval and was rolled out in 2022 into the kind of the implementation phase of our program. The first step after we had a plan was to actually go through and make sure we were all on the same page of what were all the waste programs that existed, all the waste streams that existed across our facilities, what was some of the language that we wanted to describe these programs around, as well as reviewing all of our policies to identify were there any gray areas in which it wasn't clear on what we were trying to educate employees on for waste disposal. And so through this effort, we ended up building out an annual all-employee training, which is designed to be an interactive experience. So there's a series of waste sorting scenarios that employees go through. The training is filtered towards their department, and so it's filtered based on what waste streams they'll interact with on a daily basis. And it's really driven around the logic behind all of the waste bins. So in a clinical setting, they could be interacting with up to 12 different hampers or waste streams. And so really making sure that we were driving behind the logic and not just training towards a specific product and really just kind of thinking about what was behind those bins. So this was the first step to kind of standardize language, standardize to make sure all the key stakeholders were at least promoting and educating on the correct topics. And then after kind of a year of implementation, it became clear of we were able to make some decent progress in that year, but really it's there's a lot of challenges of keeping obviously zero waste in any of the sustainability priorities a top priority within a department. And so last year, with leadership support, we actually launched a zero waste task force to be kind of that organizational body that was responsible for moving forward our strategic plan and ultimately owning all of the strategies and actions that were built out. And so this task force fits within our larger governance structure, which you see on the slide highlighted here. We have a representative from each of kind of the high volume waste generating departments, as well as our waste handlers, EBS, food service, materials logistics. And then we have two co-chairs that are at the VP level that ultimately most of these departments roll up into. And so they're really the group that's helping kind of prioritize each year and push this forward. Um, with that said, kind of the first priority that they recognized was it was great that we had this annual training that would touch base on zero waste each year, but really to make this embedded in our culture, we needed to have a greater increase in touch points throughout the year, as well as help ensure that all of our programs felt like an actual or all of the waste streams actually felt like they were part of a program. And so we went through a whole rebranding effort for our point of disposal signage, color coded them all so they indicate actually the destination of where the waste is going to go afterwards to help highlight there is a difference in all of them. They are all uniquely important. So really kind of draw attention to that. We also made sure that all of them have QR codes. So if there's any issues or challenges or if anyone ever has any questions, they can directly contact the department responsible. And so really focused on first kind of that point of disposal training resource. And then I'll talk a little bit more about we then recognized that there was a lot of, I'd say, lack of confidence that even if employees were doing the right thing, was the waste actually going to somewhere different downstream? And so we focused a lot on educating and empowering our waste handlers to make sure that materials were flowing and being transported correctly out off of our facilities. One other kind of tool for employees was a waste disposal chart, which we are in the process of deploying centrally to all of our different departments. But really, these are a resource that translates the annual training into a one-stop shop kind of reference that employees can reference throughout the year. And so there we have 7 different versions of these that are all customized for different unique departments and categories across the hospitals. One of our kind of largest challenges is you can see how many waste streams and how different the waste streams are per area. And so it's a continual challenge of making sure we're educated across the board. So on the EVS side, we worked very closely with EVS, food service, materials management, our contractors, all of those kind of folks that are interacting with our loading docks and helping waste flow out of our facilities. And so we integrated into annual EVS and food services and materials logistics annual trainings, additional resources that really highlighted kind of holistic management of all of the different waste streams that they're managing, but also integrated language around empowering them to vocalize if they see something that's off. They may not be the ones that are obviously putting the materials into those bins, but if they start to see that there's a lot of contamination upstream, they've been trained very well and have kind of given that empowerment to speak up to their supervisors, let them know so that we can kind of work upstream to address any issues that they're observing. And so, in addition, integrated language into their daily workflows, as well as their just onboarding training for any of new employees, added dock signage to make that a little clearer and upfront of where materials should be flowing once they reach the dock. Um, and ultimately kind of having on the spot kind of references and resources for them that are a little bit more visual on what our processes are. Once you bring a bag of recycling down to the dock, it needs to be opened. And they also have the right that if they're looking at that bag of recycling, it's full of contaminated items, they can treat that as trash. And making sure that they are aware that they don't have to just treat it as recycling if it's in a green bag. They have their have the capability to really make sure that, again, they're the last line of defense. Without them, this program really won't be possible. So I went through a lot. We've been on quite the journey. So really, all of this started with a lot of individuals focalizing a desire around waste reduction, waste pilots, and just a overall interest in wanting to do more across the organization. And from there, had really harnessed that energy into building that case for our leadership team on setting sustainability goals, building out a zero waste strategy, and transitioning into the implementation phase. One area that I'm happy to answer questions on that I know I don't have time to cover today is around data. We do have a senior data analyst on our team, and one of the largest challenges when we started kind of moving towards this was ensuring we had accurate, reliable data to allow us to be a little bit more transparent. So we've done a lot of work with our vendors to move in the right direction to get more reliable data as we kind of move forward. But yeah, it's been quite the journey, and I'm excited to keep identifying more opportunities for us to dive in and have an impact for zero waste. But look forward to all of your questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Avery. That was a really great presentation. I appreciate the really the strength in the strategic plan, and then how that really trickles down and guides your actions to build quality and standards into the system. It's really good. One question I have, can you expand on how you're engaging your environmental services team? You said that you're both educating but also empowering them to lead quality and to provide feedback. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, no, of course. So we've been really working on kind of top-down, bottom-up support and one, identifying at the frontline level who are our champions, who are those kind of advocates that have done the deeper dive, have really taken all of this information to heart and leveraging them as kind of the active voice to their peers, while also pairing that with on our zero waste task force. We do have our director of environmental services that is helping to really lead and ensure that these training resources are actually being applied across their workforce and ensuring that they're also knowledgeable and able to talk about zero waste. I think that was one of our challenges in the beginning was sustainability can talk about zero waste, but can our teams were struggling on like what is zero waste exactly? Like how do you think about holistic waste management? It's more than just recycling, right? It's really about everything that they're managing across their work stream. So it's been I'd say a combination of really leveraging those natural voices that we're always doing the right things, we're always exemplary staff, and allowing them to continue to be leaders in their roles while pairing that with the management support and obviously educational resources alongside that.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I have one more question, which is dear to the hearts of everyone in San Francisco, which is dumping loose. Really, we have to collect recycling in bags for hospital salt quality, safety, efficiency, but we've got to dump it without that bag when it gets to the compactor. Can you talk about any challenges that you face in this and just what your approach is to both supporting hospital quality as well as recycling quality at the same time?
Yeah, so we recently also had to make that shift of dumping recycling. And I'd say that was it took a while for us to get over that the barrier and the concept of can it be done and is it safe to be done? And so I think or how we did approach it was management actually going down and testing it, right? Of not asking their frontline staff to do it, of let's test it ourselves to see like what would be a safe process, and to be able to demonstrate to them what the appropriate and safe process would be, which is ultimately where we did have success. But the piece that I think has been helpful is if a bag of recycling was done correctly upstream, there shouldn't be anything in there that's going to endanger or like harm an employee, especially if we're intentionally placing our recycling bins not in patient rooms, in areas in which there's not really any access for the sharps to get in there, which there should never be any sharps or any items like that. And so really on that part, then that's where closing the gap on educating, like what does recycling look like? So then our staff can quickly look at the bag and see, does this look like a bag recycling? In which then in that case, it is safe to actually open it from the top and dump. But I think it wasn't until we were able to get to the point of one, closing the infrastructure gaps upstream, because we did kind of have rogue bins all over the place post-COVID, of closing that, reorganizing what was upstream for us then to feel confident that if employees are trained, if they dispose of materials correctly, then it should ultimately be a risk-free job for our staff downstream, and to really make sure that they are aware if they see a lot of medical materials, PPE, like that's just trash. Like don't try to open that, right? Like that's no failure to themselves. We have to work upstream. So it definitely was, I'd say, a slow process to get to that point, and really kind of demonstrating from a management standpoint, can we do it safely before we ask staff to do it?
That's great. That's really helpful. Excellent. We'll know that you have a lot of best practice partners in that journey in San Francisco. So we'll have a list of folks that you can call.
Thanks.
Okay, Avery, thank you so much. We're take more questions for Avery at the end, but right now we are going to be joined by Mike Geller with Providence, Oregon. Pull up your bio here, Mike. Mike Geller, I'm excited to present today, is the Senior Sustainability Program Manager at Providence, Oregon. Mike has been with Providence for 19 years and kicked off zero waste work there in the year 2010. Mike is responsible for the creation and adoption of sustainable management practices for Providence's 8 Oregon hospitals and satellite facilities. This includes implementing programs in waste reduction and increased recycling, alternative transportation, healthy food, energy, and environmentally preferred purchasing. Michael notes his inspiration for sustainability work as his young daughter. He wants to leave her a safe and healthy planet. Mike, welcome. We are so happy to have you share with us today how Providence, Oregon is achieving zero waste.
Yeah, thank you. Can you see my screen okay? Okay,
Yes.
so
Oops.
we good?
Yes, go for it, Mike.
Here's our, we've been working on this for quite a number of years. Our CEO came out in 2019 and said that we would be working towards becoming carbon negative by 2030. And it seemed like such a task. We actually divided up the, what does that mean? So we created this acronym, WE ACT, stands for waste, energy and water, agriculture and food, chemicals. Chemicals also includes anesthetic agents and things like that, and transportation. And by breaking it up into these 5 buckets, it made it a little easier to work through. And today I've been asked to talk about 2 of our programs around waste. One is food waste, and the second one is about our recycling center that's based here in Portland, Oregon. So if you don't know, Providence, we're based in 7 western states, and we also have a business park in Hyderabad, India, where all of our data analysts and things like that are. We have 122,000 caregivers, and you can see the 34,000 physicians, 38,000 nurses, 51 hospitals in these 7 states. So we're going to talk today about the hospitals that I manage in Oregon, and we have 8 hospitals in Oregon. So here's our environmental stewardship commitment. We act toward carbon negative by 2030, together with caregivers to reduce costs at our environmental footprint on health and justice for individuals and the communities that we serve, and for a better world by caring for our common home that we will pass on to future generations. And then read down the left side, it reads, we act together on health for a better world. So we also, our secondary, not only work towards being carbon negative by 2030, is to divert more than 50% of our waste streams from landfill or hazardous streams by 2030. So you look at the top three: disposed waste, landfill, biohazard, hazardous, and then diverted waste. How to get to that less than 50% or more than 50% is through compost, recycling, universal waste collection, donations, and also avoided waste. Avoided waste being items that we don't purchase. So you start using reusable items, things like that. It avoids the purchase, so that also figures into that 50%. But today I'm just going to talk about the first two here in the yellow, which is compost and recycling. So a few facts that are astounding to me living in America is between 30 and 40% of the food produced in America today is wasted. 1 out of 7 Americans struggle with food insecurities. And then the last one is food waste is responsible for around 58% of the methane emissions from landfill. So it's really important that we, A, use our food better, B, keep it out of the landfill. So how did Providence as an organization do that? We signed on the Cool Food Pledge, which is committing to a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from food we serve by 2030. Collaborated with stakeholders inside and outside our organization to develop our food waste reduction plan. And we've been working on this since 2010, when we first started composting at one hospital. But again, as a lot of us know, if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you need to go. So we started tracking our food waste to get a baseline, and a baseline understanding of where it's being generated. Is it prep? Is it meals not eaten? Where is it coming from? So then we set up a program and we're able to track that food waste to get a baseline. Obviously, we got reports back from our vendor, our hauler that takes the food waste away, to know how much we're producing. But it's more about understanding where it's being generated so that we can go in and try to reduce that. Some of the things that we did was reduce the amount of food waste through donation, repurpose, and menu changes. Now, repurpose is an interesting one. A story always comes back to me where when they're slicing tomatoes to make sandwiches, the end caps of the tomatoes were food waste. Well, we had a couple of chefs that started keeping those things and using them next time when they made sauce, like spaghetti sauce or something like that. They would reuse that, repurpose those items, and rather than it becoming food waste. And then we finally developed a program to collect food waste internally and send to a compost processing facility. And I can't stress enough that working with the local governmental agencies or your haulers, because in Portland, we had a food waste program for years that went to a compost facility, and we were able to include paper, napkins, compostable items, things like that. And then that landscape changed, and we went to a food only program because it's going to an anaerobic digester. So, keep abreast of what's changing on the horizon helps keep a strong program going. And then, so that's my food waste piece. And now the fun one for me is, what happened? There it goes. We have a commingled recycling program in Oregon where our 8 Oregon hospitals collect material, recyclables, in a blue bag. And here's our poster that's been around for a while. It's Providence Recycles. And we developed this program many years ago, and it's called our Blue Bag Recycling Program. And if you'll notice at the bottom of the picture, there's a blue bin and a blue bag. And that signifies recycling at all of our Oregon hospitals. And on the left is the yes, please. So soft plastics, peel packs, bubble wrap, plastic bags, sterile blue wrap, rigid plastics 1 through 7, which is bottles, basins, tubs, packaging, block styrofoam, plastic utensils, anything that's clean. And like it says right here, please rinse dirty items. And if you don't, then it's garbage. And then we also included tin cans and aluminum cans in this program. On the right is the no thank you, no IV bags, tubing, gloves, unrinsed containers, coffee cups, frozen food boxes. We do, however, recycle separately glass, corrugated cardboard, paper. We do shred on site all of our paper, whether it's confidential or not, because we don't want caregivers to have to decide if it's confidential or not. If it's paper, we shred it and it is recycled after that. And then now we'll go on a little tour of our recycling center. So you can see these blue bags are very full of recycling that is collected in all the hospitals. And then it goes into these super sacks, these very large white bags. And then we have a truck that goes around and picks these super sacks up a day. You know, one of our 500 bed hospitals probably produces over 20 of these a day. And then the truck brings it to our recycling center in Northeast Portland. You can see it stacked up in the back, stuff ready to be shipped out. Here's a sorting table. Here's the bags that get put on the sorting table to be sorted. And here's the team. Now, right now we're employing 20 adults with disabilities that sort this material. And the two gentlemen on the right have been with us for over 10 years doing this work. They open up the blue bags, and then they sort. You can see next to them are all these different bins and cans. So they sort it out by commodity, whether it's rigid plastic, film plastic, whatever. We want to sort into the different commodities. Here's some blue wrap, bales of blue wrap. These are like 600-700 pound bales of blue wrap, and you can see them on the right, how many we have. Film plastic, all of our film plastic. The only picture I forgot to put in here was the blue bags that we put our recycling in are also recyclable. They go to but we found that if we separate the clear from the clear film is worth more than the blue film. So we do actually segregate and recycle all of our blue bags. PET packaging, you can see bales of it on the right. And then every instrument that goes into the OR comes in this packaging, and we're able to recycle all of this. So all the rigid plastic, there's basins and tubs and items here. Now these tubs right here, these white ones, are actually go into the operating rooms and have had bioburden in them. But in our large hospitals, the sterile processing staff actually takes those out of the operating room, puts them on their cart wash, and runs them through the cart washer so they're clean and dry and no bioburden. And we're able to recycle these, which is just another. Working with a group with the generators of the material really helps them understand what they can do to improve our recycling percentages. Irrigation bottles, it's a polypropylene. It's a very sought after material. If you think about a running jacket or a windbreaker, it might have some irrigation bottles in it because it is the same material. And that's actual sterile blue wrap. Now, all this recycling that I've been talking about, we partnered with a minority-owned woman business here in Portland. It's about 5 miles from our recycling center. That is a plastics processor. So that's blue wrap. They take all of our plastic in and shred it, chip it, extrude it, and sell it back into the injection molding world. So it gets a second life, and it's been a great partnership for many years. And and so we're able to recycle so much more than you could. And if we didn't, we've had this program, this recycling center, started even before I did in the basement of one of the hospitals, and then it's just grown since then. And then in 2010, we really expanded it. And then also boxboard, all the packaging material that comes with the supplies. You can see it. We bale that and recycle that as well. Yeah, I think there's one more. Block styrofoam. I mean, it's the bane of everybody's existence in healthcare, but we are able to recycle it. It is shredded and then pelletized and comes back into the world of plastic injection molding. I went through that fast, but I wanted to make sure we had time for questions.
I was trying to find my unmute button there. Thank you so much, Mike. Your program is super interesting. I think one thing that is key to success is that long-term relationship with a local plastics processor. And so that gives a lot of flexibility.
Yeah.
That being said, the thing that I like about your program is it's a different way of thinking about, what you need is this kind of downstream quality checks that then feeds back into quality upstream. Can you talk a little bit about the quality standards for the materials that come into your center and how you give the feedback back upstream, both to environmental services teams or waste generators?
So we do track which hospital the different super sacks come from, so we can track it back to the hospital if we do find contamination. We just don't have a lot of contamination, and it's due to very strong green teams. I give presentations to the OR suite, the OR teams, and different teams that generate the waste to talk about it. And I think what really helps us with contamination is I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Is supply. It's great that we can recycle, and I always say this. It's great we can recycle, but really, it's about supplying jobs to the underserved in our community. These guys have a great job. They work 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I take that little nugget back to the departments and say, and show them pictures of the guy, like I just showed you guys. Show them pictures of the people hand sorting and really drive home the point that this stuff is hand sorted. And if we see a bag that has something is obviously contaminated, like free flowing liquid or things like that, it's garbage. And I think what's really helped us around contamination is that connection between the human piece of the hand sorting, and it's really helped them.
Yeah, I think, and I think it's something to keep in mind because there's so much technology coming down the line, but I think nothing's more powerful driver of quality than looking someone in the eyes that you're giving your garbage to. So, anyways, fun things to consider in the future. So this second question came in from Michael, which is how much funding are you recouping from recycling? Can you talk about the economics?
Not a lot right now, Michael. The plastics market is so up and down. It just depends on the time of year and the political climate. It's not enough to support the program. I can tell you that right now. One of the ways we can look at it is, if we do 400, we're saving money with landfill avoidance. If we threw everything away, it would almost cost as much to throw it away as it is to recycle it. And yet we're keeping it. It's helping us maintain our goal of 50%. But there's just not a lot of money in it right now. The fiber cardboard, I also collect. We have cardboard compactors at our large hospitals, and I do collect that money that goes back into our budget to try to help fund the program. But it's definitely a cost.
Plastics recycling is tricky. Talk about data, and then we can up to both you and Avery. I know that you said that data drives your programming. Can you talk about how you use data to drive kind of decision making or collection strategies?
Yeah. So one of the in our Hyderabad, India facility, where we have data analysts over there, similar to what we were talking about earlier, is the data comes from the vendors, a certain amount of it. And so we track everything from energy use, water use, recycling, waste. Everything is calculated by that team and has developed a profile for each hospital. And competition is good, because it's very plain and simple to see how each hospital is doing with data. If you don't measure it, it, you don't know where to go.
Yeah. I'm going to open it back up and send the question back to Avery for to start off. Our Recology teammate noted their signs, and I think that it's something that I think that the healthcare world can use, that can learn from the zero waste world, which is that standardizing signage, like a clinician doesn't really think about the difference between throwing away biohazard waste or recycling, as far as like visual wayfinding. So putting the same visual message there is kind of one thing. That being said, like seeing all of those streams together, it really shows you that like sorting fatigue is a real challenge in hospitals. Can you talk about how you inspire clinicians to sort correctly when they get to the less like high stakes streams like recycling and compost?
No, that's a great question. I'd say it's a continual journey on that, but we've seen a lot of honestly momentum built once we set organizational goals, and it became a leadership commitment to have a zero waste target, to have our net zero targets, to engage employees across the workforce. I'd say that was really a pivotal moment where we started to see a lot of clinicians starting to buy in a lot more. With that said, that obviously only goes so far. And so I showed the governance structure briefly. We have a number of other working groups and committees and also the task force being dedicated towards being that advocate and that point of contact for the department has definitely helped kind of build a network across our organization of leaders that are tooled with how to kind of promote and motivate their colleagues, and also just be the kind of a reference point for questions. And if they don't know the questions, they know the sustainability department is there to help and kind of point them in the right direction. So I'd say having that network across the organization has been another pivotal part. The other part is kind of meeting the clinicians where they're at and seeing what gets them excited. We've had a lot of success around like our medical supply donation program across our inpatient floors, or we have nurses that are very much kind of the champions leading those collections. And I found like once they're jazzed about one of the kind of extra waste streams, it kind of starts to build that momentum, and they start to gain interest in all of it holistically. So it's definitely a continued journey. The signage has made a huge difference because I think that had helped close that gap in that belief that all the bins are the same. Doesn't really actually matter what you're like where you're putting the waste because it all just disappears. And so I think honestly the rebranding, and we're still in the process of fully deploying across the organization because we have some contracts stood up for renewal, and so it's paused. But even just the initial deployment, we actually started to see our numbers, what I think is shift the appropriate direction. Our red bag waste started to decrease because typically we've been on a higher percentage, and so we're starting to see, I think, a reshifting of our waste streams to where people are actually utilizing the programs correctly. So excited to kind of see that stabilize.
That's awesome. I'm seeing a question from Joe, which is, what is your approach to manage, and it's for both, what's your approach to managing food waste from inpatients? Second part is, have you considered employing adults with disabilities to sort out recyclables and compostables from patient food trays?
Happy, or Mike, or either way, happy to start.
Go ahead, Avery.
So what we've been doing on the inpatient, as long as all of the materials from inpatient floors ends up back on the trays, those all go back down to our kitchens, and our kitchen staff are trained on sorting those to be recycled and composted appropriately. So for the most part, we're actually educating our nursing staff to not clear the trays and to send it back down to our kitchens. And so that's definitely something that we've been kind of focused on there.
Yeah, same for us. Put everything back on the tray. Don't throw it away in the patient room. And the kitchen nutrition services staff, before it goes in the dish machine, have food waste collection bins right there. They have the blue bag recycling right there, and then they have trash. So they're the ones that are cleaning the plates. To Joe's point, anytime I can figure out a way to employ more adults with disabilities, we will. During COVID, a lot of that got shut down, and we were able to actually increase the amount of staff that we had because they lost a lot of them were unemployed. I mean, the unemployment rate for the adults with disabilities is about 80%. So being able to increase that through COVID was huge for us, but good idea to find more work for them.
Margie, I'm going to pause. Do you have any questions? I have a few. I'll keep rolling, but I wanted to see if you have any or if there's any other from the chat.
There are no others from the chat right now, Erica, and I think you can just keep rolling. I do want to just emphasize, Mike, you also had mentioned with respect to your blue bag, just to make it easy for clinicians to put anything in there, right? That was part of your goal.
Yeah, that is correct. We want to make it simple. Caregivers are busy, everybody's busy. And how do we make it really simple? I mean, you see a blue bag, you see a blue bin, you know it's recyclable. There are signs either on the bin or hanging on the wall behind it. But it's so uniform throughout the whole hospital, whether it's in an operating room or a soiled or clean utility room. We do not collect recyclables in patient rooms because there's really no way to control that. You'll get a lot of pizza boxes, etc. So what we've done is message with nursing that if a patient or a family member has a recyclable item like a beverage container, something like that, that it goes back on the patient tray and then goes downstairs and is recycled that way.
I'll say, Mike, your program, sorry, Erica, for chiming in, but your program, I think, is in a lot of ways the direction healthcare needs to go, is kind of a one bin solution. I mean, given space constraints, like we're at the point of looking at, the 12 different waste streams in a clinical area, and how do you add to that? You can't, right? Like one from a space standpoint, but also from an education standpoint, it's so difficult to then think about how do you get all those materials out if they're in different sorted waste streams. So I think sorting off-site or sorting down at the dock or wherever it is may be a main solution that we're looking towards in the future as well.
Yeah, to your point, Avery, we have our signage too that shows all the different waste streams, and it's crowded. There's a lot. It is very complicated, and trying not to change. Get it once we get it set, leave it alone. If that makes sense, so that staff get used to, a yellow bin, that's trace chemo, or this bin is blue sharps container, things like that, and just try to keep it simple. Because I really believe there's things like signage overload. It just blends into the wall at some point, the more you have. So
Totally. One question, and I think this is a common question and a very valid one, whether it's just, hospital operational staff, whether you're a frontline staff member in environmental services, in food services, or in the clinical area, people are pretty busy. And so new waste reduction initiatives, it's not, if we do it right, it's not more work, but it's different work. And so the question is, just what is your approach to kind of setting up those operations across those different work groups? Is your staff unionized, and have you experienced any unique challenges in this area?
Mike, you're chuckling. I think you have an immediate thought if you want to go first.
Thanks, Avery. Our EVS and food nutrition services are not unionized. Typically, facilities is and nursing is. It's difficult because you add bins, even though EVS is moving the same amount of material, whether it's garbage or recycling, it is an additional bag, an additional work. So again, I think the one bag program helps. They're not having to grab a multiple bags or anything like that. It is just one. I think that's the biggest thing, is keeping it simple so that it doesn't add too much to their workload.
I think one of our kind of main challenges of kind of program design and thinking about rolling out programs across organization has just been the amount of square footage that we have. And also, and quite frankly, a lot of these programs predated me, but then they all got disrupted during COVID, and we added a lot of bins that can be misinterpreted across our entire facility. So the past couple years have actually been finding all of those gaps and closing all those gaps, and working with our staff to do so. And our frontline staff aren't unionized, and our actually nursing staff aren't unionized either. And so we actually have been in some ways do benefit from that. Of obviously they're in line with everything that we're trying to achieve. But I'd say the most momentum has been built because of the zero waste task force. Now that we have the correct individuals, correct decision makers in that room to be able to then utilize them to pull in who else needs to be a part of these conversations as we move forward. But it's tough.
It is tough. And with the same amount of materials, I've definitely done some, set up a program to say, hey, this is recycling, only service it, once a week. And it just doesn't, that's just not the culture of healthcare. You just don't leave any waste accumulating. And so it's really, I found most success just taking away bins in certain areas so that there's no garbage to collect, or, it's just hard to, there's an art form to find operational efficiencies. One more question from, it looks like Alex is asking, just about the Providence recycle signage and kind of reiterating that it's one bin. And so you have kind of non-clinical, non-lab items on that as well as uh, specifically clinical items. Will you reiterate, you use the same sign in both places just to prevent confusion. Is that correct?
Yes, we do. We use it's the same signage. I think there's actually a picture of an irrigation bottle on the signage, but we try to incorporate all departments under one sign. We've made a couple of specific one-offs for certain areas, but for the most part, we try to leave it all the same. That way, whether they're working at a different hospital in Providence, Oregon, or if they're working in a different department, everything is the same.
Excellent. Listen, we have 2 minutes left. I want to thank you both. Is there anything that is there any other questions from our SF hospital departments? If so, feel free to unmute yourself or put a note in the chat. And is there anything that we didn't ask you that you want to make sure that you share today?
Be patient. It's important work. It's a better world for all if we do this work.
And starting somewhere is progress. So I'm sure everyone is in a different spot in your journey on thinking about waste and waste management, and everyone has a different starting point. So don't be ashamed of that. Start somewhere and just continue to chip away. The work's never ending. So any progress you make is definitely beneficial.
Excellent. Listen, I want to thank you, Mike and Avery, and everyone who joined us today from near and far. These solutions are created as a network, and so we hope to do more of this in the future. We definitely look forward to doing more of this locally with our SF hospital partners and look forward to seeing you April 2nd. If there's any other questions, we will be following up. And so feel free to respond to emails and we'll make sure that we get those questions passed along. Hey, thanks to everyone. Thanks to the city of San Francisco, to our friends at Recology and all the participants today. Everyone have a great Friday. Take care.